I've done a video on this topic in the past discussing how to determine how much power you need if the electrical service to your home was cut. Now, in that video, I went into a lot of detail, but I still get emails asking the same question. What setup do I need to power this particular thing if the power goes out? Now, 9 out of 10 times, the item that they're asking about is a refrigerator. And most want to know the bare minimum setup they would need. And most ask about a solar generator in particular to keep their freezer or refrigerator running. So here's what I'll do in this video. Instead of bombarding you with technical terms, we're going to keep it simple. This is going to be what I would consider a video that really builds on itself. We'll start off with a simple concept, and in each section, we'll build on top of those concepts as we go. And I promise that I'll intentionally try to go slow, and I would encourage you to stick around until the end as we'll put all the information together and we'll stack it on top of each other. And again, learning as we go. If you have to watch this video a couple of times, it's going to be worth it as it will be a very firm understanding of everything you would need to know. And by the end, you'll understand how to power that refrigerator or that other electrical device if the power were to go out. Plus, at the end of the video, I'm going to show you a low price device that you can pick up at either Home Depot or Amazon that will be a very useful tool to really show you how much power each device in your house actually uses. And with that information, we can actually do a lot. So here's what I'll do in this video. I'm going to start off by defining a few basic concepts that we'll use throughout the video. And this is going to serve as a foundation, a guide, if you will, as we move along. Next, we're going to take a look at various options on the market for powering devices. We'll specifically cover solar and gas generators. And finally, we'll take what we learned with these concepts and then look at items that we would want to power if the grid were to go down and there's just no power available. So we'll learn how much they realistically need. And again, don't worry or feel like you might get overwhelmed. I'm going to keep this video as basic as possible so you can easily follow along and make educated decisions regarding the right setup for you. The basics of power. We're going to start off the video by going over a simple word. And don't worry, we'll focus on this simple word and then we'll show examples of how this is used, which is where I believe you'll quickly connect the dots. And don't feel overwhelmed in this segment, as I'll show a practical example in just a moment to illustrate what I'm about to explain. There's one unit that we'll discuss at this point that will serve as a foundation throughout this entire video. And it's a word that you'll see on electronics if you pay attention. And that word is watt. Okay, I said a technical word. Again, the word is watt. It's a unit of power that we're going to use in this video to help guide you in determining what you need to know if the power goes out. And let's progress with this word a little further by introducing the word kilowatt. There are two parts of this word, kilo and watt. Kilo simply means 1,000. So a kilowatt is, as you can imagine, 1,000 watts. Okay, so we've covered watts and kilowatts. And there's one last phrase that I'm going to throw at you that we'll use in this video that you'll see on things like your electricity bill, kilowatt hours. So now we have three parts here, kilo plus watts plus hour. A kilowatt hour equals the amount of energy that you would use by keeping a 1,000 watt appliance running for 1 hour. You see what I did there? Kilo is 1,000, then we have watts, and then we have hour. Or if you were powering two appliances, both using 500 watts each, they would combine to consume 1 kilowatt in an hour. And on your electricity bill, you would have to pay for, you guessed it, 1 kilowatt hour. Are you still tracking with me here? So now that we've gotten that out of the way, what can we do with those newly discovered words, watt and kilowatt hour? Let's start tying this all together in a real way that helps us on our journey of understanding powering critical electrical devices if the grid were to go down. Here in front of me, I have a 1,000 watt electrical hot plate. I selected this, for example, because it uses 1,000 watts or 1 kilowatt when plugged in. And it's an easy and round number for this demonstration. If we use this for 1 hour, guess how much energy it would use? As we discussed, it would use 1 kilowatt hour. If we were to not power anything else in our house for that day, but this only one device, we would see on our electricity bill charged for 1 kilowatt hour on our electricity bill for just this day. So let's say that we use two of these for 1 hour. Then we would be billed for 2 kilowatt hours. It's really that simple, honestly. But let's say we use this one hot plate for only 15 minutes. Well, how many kilowatt hours did I just use then? Well, 15 minutes is 1/4 of an hour, so that would be 0.25 kilowatt hours used. Now, let's look at one last example, a simple light bulb. This uses only 9 watts, and it's printed right here on the side, 9 watts. Remember, by comparison, our hot plate uses 1,000 watts. So in 1 hour, how many kilowatts will this light bulb use? Well, to get this value, divide 9 by 1,000. 1,000 watts in this case, and we get 0.009. So we'd only use 0.009 kilowatt hours in an hour, which is really not that much. Where I live, 1 kilowatt hour costs 0.22 or 22 cents. So to power this light bulb each hour, it would cost me about 0.00198, or let's just round it off to 0.002, which is 1/5 of a penny. So if I ran this light bulb for about 5 hours, it would cost me just 1 penny on my electricity bill. If you've gotten this far, congratulations. You've learned the basics, and you can do a lot with this information. Up to this point, we've just played around with numbers to determine how much energy we use and how to determine those values. So now that we have this information, the rest of this video is really about determining what we would want to power and how to power it. Let's jump to the next point about how to power these devices. But remember to stick around until the end of the video, as we're going to tie this all together in a very, very practical way. When discussing how we'll provide power to critical devices such as a refrigerator or other items if the grid is down, we'll look at a few options that are most popular, namely solar and gas generators. I did a separate DIY video that shows how to build your own solar generator setup, which I'll link to up in the cards above and in the description section below if you want to check that video out. Let's start with solar generators, and then I'll briefly run through gas generators. A solar generator is a name that's given to these type of devices that you can purchase, and they allow you to plug in solar panels or a standard home wall socket that allows you to charge these. And these have an interface on the front that allows you to plug in your standard appliances and devices that you may want to operate, such as something like a light or a refrigerator or power drill, just any typical home appliance that you can plug into a wall socket at your house. Now, these systems, what they have is a battery that stores the energy we harvest from the sun with our solar panels. And I'll quickly run through an explanation of solar generators here for you and gas generators afterwards. Much of what we're about to learn about solar generators, the same principles apply to gas generators. Capacity for solar generators. Capacity simply refers to the amount of charge this device can store. Think about filling your car's gas tank with gas. It has the ability to, let's say, on average, hold 15 to 20 gallons. And that's a vehicle's, again, average fuel storage capacity. Now, these solar generators, they have a unit that you'll see on their specs regarding capacity. And it's normally listed as kilowatt hours or kWh. Now, earlier we covered watt hours in great detail. For example, this Jackery 2000 Pro, it can hold 2,160 watt hours or 2.1 kilowatt hours of capacity. Remember earlier we spoke about the induction cooking plate that I have here in front of me. It pulls roughly 1,000 watts when you plug it in. So in 1 hour, it would pull 1,000 watt hours from this Jackery, or 1 kilowatt hour. So the Jackery here in front of me could power this for about 2 hours. Now, there's a few technical details that we'll cover in a moment that impact this number, but if you get this concept, you're doing fine. Continuous and surge output. These two values tell us how much this device can actually output. If you were to power devices with this solar generator, it could output 2,000 watts at once. Now, I don't recommend that you plug in devices that combine pull 2,000 watts as you're running this device at 100% output capability, which over time will damage the battery because it will heat it up very quickly. I'll give you an example. If you were to run your car all day long at the max RPM, you're redlining it, you would probably burn up the engine pretty quickly. The same principle applies to these devices, and ideally you want to run them at about 50% of what the manufacturer lists for the continuous output. Now, let's plug in this hot plate and see what happens. As you can see, the front of the screen shows that we're providing roughly 1,000 watts to this induction heat plate. So again, if this heat plate were to be left on, we can anticipate that the Jackery could power it for roughly 2 hours. The Jackery can hold, remember, 2 kilowatt hours. Again, it won't come out exactly to 2 hours due to efficiency issues, but we'll talk about that in a moment. A quick note about surge. Some devices, when you start them up, they draw a lot of power. Things like fans, refrigerators, or saws, they have a motor. And when you start these devices, you'll see a momentary spike to get the engine moving, and then it will settle down to the continuous watt usage that we discussed in the previous point. Now, why is it important that I bring up this value? This Jackery has a surge capability of 4,000 watts. If you were to plug in a device that has a higher surge than 4,000 watts, then it's going to cause this device to trip out a circuit internally, which can be reset whenever you turn it off and then turn it back on. The reason being is that we've exceeded the maximum surge output capability of this device. Solar input capability. This is a very important number to consider when you shop for these type of devices. It gives you an understanding of how quickly you can charge this with solar panels. This particular unit states that it can handle 1,200 watts of solar input. Now, just a small word about solar panels. Typically, they're about 75% efficient, meaning if a solar panel says that it is a 100-watt panel, you can really expect under normal circumstances, you're going to probably get around 75 watts instead of the full 100. So if I were to plug in, let's say 1,200 watts of panels, I would probably on average get about 900 watts coming into this device. Now it can go higher, and I've seen it go higher, but that's a pretty average number that you can expect. It's not always this precise, and factors like clouds, whether or not the panels are pointed directly at the sun, temperature, and several other factors, they all come into play. But this is a pretty good indicator of what you can expect when charging these with solar panels. Also, if you've gotten this particular Jackery plugged into solar panels, you can both charge a solar generator while providing power to an appliance. Again, I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you, but at the end of the video, we're going to tie this all together, I promise. So let's move on. ICE generators. A quick word about internal combustion engines or ICE generators. In the previous discussion, we spoke about 3 values in detail. We went over capacity, continuous, and surge output. ICE generators have the same values that we can compare. Let's look at this Champion 3,500 watt generator that I have sitting in my garage. Let's run through the same numbers as we did with the solar generator. I'm not going to explain the meaning behind each value, but rather we're going to take a quick look at these values that you'll see on these devices. Surge watts, 4,375 watts. Running watts, 3,500 watts. Gas capacity, 4.7 gallons. Runtime. At 50% load, it can run for 14 hours. Let's start with that last value of runtime, which is important. It says that on 4.7 gallons of gas, it can run for 14 hours at a 50% load. So on their website, what they're telling us is that if we put 1,700 watts of load on it, it can run for 14 hours. Remember earlier that we used the example of the hot plate, which pulls 1,000 watts. That would give you another 700 watts of load that you could put on this generator. It can handle up to 4,375 watts of surge. If you were to power a big fan or a motor, that's the max for this generator. We'll tie all this together in just a moment when we talk about specific devices that we want to power. What to power? Okay, so let's do a quick recap. We discussed watts, we discussed kilowatts, and kilowatt hours. We then pivoted to discuss how these units are shown on the specs for solar and gas generators and what they mean from an application standpoint. You should now have, I hope, a firm understanding. If you're still not clear, I would encourage you to rewatch the video from the beginning because now we're going to take that information and apply it to determine what devices we can power and for how long. This is always the question that comes up when people are trying to determine what generator is best for them. As I stated at the beginning of the video, the number one question I get asked all the time is how long will this power my refrigerator? And in this segment, I'm going to focus on the discussion of solar generators. And I think it's easier to answer that question with gas generators as the manufacturer will actually state how long the engine will run based on how much gas is in the tank. But with solar generators, it's a little more difficult to answer that question. Now, in the past and previous videos, I told people to go to the manufacturer's website to get information on how much energy a refrigerator will use on something like a daily or monthly or annual basis. And there's a lot of factors that determine this value, so it's hard to get a perfect answer. I followed this approach for my own refrigerator, and they estimate that it will consume about 1.5 kilowatt hours per day. But I have a device installed in my house that tracks my power consumption on each power line. And I have a line dedicated to my refrigerator. And the app shows me that on an average day, I consume about 0.9 kilowatt hours for my refrigerator. So 0.9 kilowatt hours equals 900 watts. In order to determine how much energy we need each hour, I could just simply divide 900 by 24, which is the number of hours in a day. And what I end up getting is 37.5. We can do a lot with this information in just a moment, which we're going to show you on a calculator that I built for you. But before we jump into that, let's look at a secret weapon that I mentioned earlier to help you determine the usage each day of your devices, a kilowatt meter. And you can pick these up at Home Depot or on Amazon for about 20 bucks. I'll post a link to it below in the description section. I picked this one up, I think, at Harbor Freight. What you can do with this is you can plug this device into a wall socket and then plug the device you need to monitor into this. And what it will do is it will track the energy that flows through it. What I would advise you to do is to hook this up to your refrigerator and then come back in 24 hours. If you click this button here on the side, it's the purple one, it says kilowatt hours on the top and then hour on the bottom. And we know what kilowatt hour means, as we've already covered this earlier. After 24 hours, we'll know exactly how much your refrigerator needs to power it for 1 day. Of course, you can apply this to any appliance or device that you want to monitor. You can even see in real time how much a device is pulling when you plug it into this measuring device. And this gives you a lot of information, which I would encourage you to pick one of these up because it's really going to educate you on what your devices really use in real world situations. Tying it all together. Okay, the moment has arrived. We've learned a lot up to this point in the video, but let's tie it all together so you can answer the question of how much energy you'll need and what device can power your refrigerator or other appliances if the power were to go out. A quick note about solar panels. If you have solar panels, you can power appliances indefinitely as long as you produce more power than you consume. Well, we'll talk about that in a moment. So let's look at the calculator I built for you. Let's use a refrigerator example again. We determined earlier that it uses 37.4 watts each hour. And I have a spreadsheet that has a calculator built in, and it will show you how long each solar generator can power the device. Before you can use this calculator, click on File, go down to Make a Copy, and then you can move this or copy it over to your own Google Drive where you can edit it. If you're not sure how to do this, simply go to Google and type in this phrase, how to copy a Google Sheet to my Google Drive, and it will provide you the steps to do what I just explained. So now that we have this open, you'll see I put the 37.4 in this row next to a refrigerator option. And I have one selected in the quantity field because I'm powering one of these refrigerators. Now, if I scroll down to the bottom of the spreadsheet, it will tell me how long this solar generator can power this device. The last row label in red, operation time, tells us how long each solar generator can power the devices if we leave them plugged in. I would encourage you to select one at a time to see how long it would power it. Of course, you can add additional devices on the left column that you want to power. Now, a quick word about solar panels. How much do I need? Well, it really depends on how much power we're pulling from a solar generator. Let's use a refrigerator example again. I know I'm going to get a lot of emails asking, well, what's the best option to go with to power a basic refrigerator? How many solar panels will I need? Let's run through some numbers. A typical solar panel is about 75% efficient. So a 100-watt panel will produce about 75 watts if you're directing it always at the sun. Now, a solar generator's output is, on average, about 80% efficient. This is included in the calculator on the spreadsheet. So we also have to factor in the fact that we'll have roughly 10, maybe 12 hours of usable light each day to use to power our solar panels. Plus, the sun moves, so you'll have to get out and move your solar panels maybe once an hour to direct them at the sun to get maximum efficiency. So you're obviously dealing with a few variables here. Let's answer the question, what would I need to power a refrigerator if the grid went down? Well, I wouldn't think of it as finding a minimum setup per se because you're very likely going to want to power other small devices. If I just got down to brass tacks here, I think something with a 1 kilowatt battery capacity, an inverter that could output 1,000, maybe 2,000 watts, and let's say 500 watts of solar input capability, 400 or 500 watts, I think you're going to be set for a strong enough basic system that can handle a refrigerator and other things. Looking at my spreadsheet, you'll see plenty of options that can do this. And I've reviewed the EcoFlow Delta Mini here on the channel, which is a powerful little device, and it gets close to these numbers. It's also in the spreadsheet and is one of the lower price options in this market. You get a lot of bang for your buck with it. I also just got the EcoFlow Delta 2, and I'm currently testing out, and it definitely delivers a lot of bang for your buck, plus it's expandable. I do like the EcoFlow lineup, which includes small but powerful systems. But look, at the end of the day, you can utilize the spreadsheet, which I'll link to below, which should give you plenty of options. If you want me to do a follow-up video showing the simplest setup at the most affordable price to power a refrigerator, let me know in the comments section and I can put that video together. Now, after watching this video, I would recommend you also follow up by watching my video on the best solar generator for 2022. It will reinforce many of the principles that we laid out and make things, I believe, all the more clear. I know there was a lot that was covered here, but hopefully it helps. Please let me know if you have any additional comments or questions in the comments section below. As always, stay safe out there.